have with me Mr. Subodh Bhargava and Lieutenant General Sharma. And towards this closing time of the Horasis meet, there is one subject that we all need to talk about, and that is the energy basket of India. And I thought, who else except these two gentlemen to share perspectives, output, and some things. So, Mr. Bhargava, you've been involved with this industry for a very long time in the capacity of being a board member of so many large enterprises. Where India stands today from an energy perspective, I know the government has used words like energy security, and what do you think is a more optimal way for energy usage and generation in India?
Well, you see, energy source in India traditionally has been thermal, which has got its own sort of benefits in terms of cost, and especially as the technology has been moving. But the real problem in India on thermal or other energy source is the reforms in the power sector, whether it is on transmission or distribution. But generation is the basic, and only increasing generation would not end the problems or give us all the solutions. So therefore, these reforms have to be taken rather urgently and seriously. There have been some beginnings, initiatives like in Delhi, distribution is a timeline beyond which it will not be there, and I hope they don't do that, because I don't think entrepreneurs should be going back to the government with whatever their woes in case of any problems coming up. And the mission of 20,000 megawatt solar generation by 2020, I think it's very practical, very possible.
It's on track, and
yeah, very much on track. In fact, two gigawatts of off-grid.
Yes.
So 22 now.
That's right.
It should be 20. So that's what.
And this off-grid is a challenge.
Yes.
But I'm sure we need this. Actually, we also need entrepreneurship.
Yes.
It's not just government policy.
Yeah, of course.
We need entrepreneur. And you know, the fact that rural India or the farmer doesn't wish to pay is a myth. It's not correct. If you give him power at the right time, of the right quality, he's willing to pay. And I have models available in rural India, in villages, where initially the word was that they won't pay anything more than this. They are paying for 5 rupees or 6 rupees a unit, very happily if they get the power at the right time.
absolutely. I agree with you. In fact, the one subject that we talked about, that it does not take away the land space, and so it's not intrusive in that manner. Even on the agricultural, food processing and cold chain, all the cold storage warehouse, if you just put the panels on top, it doesn't require more than that to generate enough power for that.
Absolutely. And India, what climatic sort of opportunity we have for power, solar power, is tremendous.
3,000 hours a year is what is availability, and incidence is so good, solar radiation. So I think it's a win-win for us, which should do it.
Absolutely.
And
So,
my opinion also, I think solar is the way to go, and especially for off-grid and for rural area. That's one of the areas, a part of the energy basket, I think.
For size of India, I won't write off nuclear.
No, I won't.
yeah,
The type of volume of power capacity we need, I don't think solar alone would enable us. Even in 20 years, we need a few major nuclear projects to supplement.
Another interesting thing which came up in the discussion on it, which I was a little skeptical about, is somebody turned around in Europe and said that India should reduce its energy demand. And he said that, you know, the energy demands are too high, and we have learned that lesson. And same story, back again moralistic to us. While India is growing, rather than asking for the supply side, we should manage the demand side, and therefore curb the demand and go for smarter homes, smarter air conditioning, smarter water, everything smarter, so that the energy consumption should go down. Else, he argues, that India will never be able to meet its demand, because it's going to go up so dramatically that nothing will cope with it. Your comments?
You know, energy efficiency to be improved,
Is okay.
I agree with that 100%.
Aspiration?
We have lot of wastages which we need to cut out.
Fair.
But to talk about smart houses and smart air conditioning and incur capital costs somewhere today, where consume a lot of environment today, in creating that capital asset, and tomorrow celebrate that we are not consuming, is not a correct thing. There's a lot of argument, there's a lot of debate. It's not over.
yeah.
And therefore, anyone saying that, look, cut down power generation and power production, I don't agree. But become more efficient in your power use, I agree.
I completely agree with you on that. The one thing I'd like to say, coming back to the nuclear, and since we are talking energy basket, it's my personal opinion that the original concept, which was a few years ago, that India, which is currently generating 2% of its energy through nuclear would go to 20% over in the next 20, 30 years. So I think while the activism has come in because of various incidents recently, I completely agree with you that there are a couple of things that have to happen parallelly for us to reach that point. Nuclear, going from 2 to 20 over time. Hydel, as you said, decentralized power stations all over, and solar with parity coming already proven. Yes. I mean, I remember 2 years ago, I mean, when I used to talk about this, people say, are you crazy?
Sure.
Parity?
I remember that.
Are you crazy?
Are you crazy?
And you're talking now that we've achieved that
I
point.
remember that, yes.
And so,
I think there's a ground to celebrate.
So I pick on the word that you very often use, which is the myth word, that there are a lot of myths in businesses and understanding.
Yeah.
And I think, so I feel very encouraged with this conversation.
I mean, you're a technology expert now. People are talking about smart metering. In the sense that peak time demands, the 12 o'clock is different rated, and solar is rated differently. In the grid electricity, when you're having nuclear, different. So smart metering, is that the way forward to control, help, subsidize in an indirect way electricity consumption?
You know, General, I gave a presentation at the Save Our Planet in Malaysia, and Cisco, which is earlier only a router company, has now moved on to space of creating smart cities and smart grids. The thing is, we're talking about a future of a smart grid system. On the smart grid, you have devices that are smarter than just measuring, where the traffic is bilateral, both sides. You give in and you give back, depending on you're a net consumer or a producer. So those things, I'm sure, are something of reality. Now, I don't know the timeline for India because we have to first become more self-sufficient, then get into this level. But for sure, smart grid on a larger context is the word.
Let me say, even without a smart, it's a question of accepting in the mindset the benefits of decentralized power generation and power generation with special technologies, specific technologies of peak load.
Peak load, exactly.
Now, peak load is, something where, and Wärtsilä India, along with McKinsey, have done a very detailed study to show what cost is being incurred today, or what will be the saving if we had this peak load approach accepted. And once again, I think the power ministry and the bureaucrats in the ministry are thinking of peak load provisioning to bring down the overall cost
curve,
of the power, or make available power in a more consumer-friendly manner.
Incidentally, in one off point also, I was surprised to hear today by one comment by European that India is the only country in the world which has got a ministry of non-renewable and renewable power. He says, thus shows the kind of...
That shows the seriousness, I mean...
they were very impressed by the fact...
You can interpret it either way. On one hand, if you have one window, you can do much more, a comprehensive integrated planning. When you have separate ministries, you add to some woes and problems, but there is a focus, which we might take the benefit of. And as we go forward, I'm sure we will find that integration of a larger power picture basket to be brought in.
Well, I think I feel very encouraged with this go forward on the energy basket. There's a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs in technology.
And encouraged, yes, but today's crisis, apart from, if anything is infrastructure, which is most severely impacting the growth, is power.
Power, yes.
And we need urgent action, therefore.
Absolutely.
That's important.
That's it. They say it drops 1% of your GDP if there is no energy. So 1% of GDP can come straight from there. We are now joined by Gunjan Sinha, who is the chairman of MetricStream United States. Welcome to this little debate we had on energy basket. And we had a very immersive discussion on various aspects of what the energy is. And there's one aspect that we would like to ask you, since you're in that space, is from a regulatory perspective. The energy, we're talking going nuclear, we're talking parallelly going solar, hydel, all of that, and we have reached parity with the grid with other sources. So where do you come in on that?
That's a very, very relevant conversation, and one of the things which we are now finding, and just as a quick introduction about MetricStream, MetricStream is a global leader in governance, risk, and compliance. And many of our customers are the large multinational companies, especially in the power and energy sector around the world. And these companies are actually looking at the increased regulatory risks which they have to deal with. Just to give you a simple example, a company like Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E, which is one of the largest on the west coast of the United States, they have over 2,000 people working in just auditing what they do, because there is so much regulatory oversight. Because the demand is captive, consumers they don't have a choice. They have to consume electricity from only one company.
That's PG&E.
Which is PG&E. But on the other side, there is a slew of regulations from Washington, D.C., but also at the state level, which they have to deal with. And those things change. For example, when you talk about things like smart grid, it adds a layer of complexity. How should it be priced? What are the specific regulations on which you need to comply so that you are able to actually, showcase and prove that you are actually doing what needs to be done? So that's where a lot of the challenges comes in. People think that the power companies or energy companies are not very forward-looking because they don't adopt new technologies. But one of the biggest impediments in that area is because they have to have the regulatory oversight. They fundamentally are in the risk management business. Once they know how to manage risk, then they can adopt new technologies. Sure. They can become more efficient.
Absolutely.
And that's going. Another great customer of ours on the East Coast is Constellation Energy, which is the largest energy company on the East Coast. Same story there. They have now gotten to a point where at every point of decision in the entire company, they know exactly what the risks are. So for example, if they're trading on certain energies, or if they are, they're making certain decisions on how, the pipeline or the distribution lines need to work, they know exactly what are the implications of that. What regulations they have to deal with when it comes to NERC, which is the Nuclear Energy Regulations, or FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulations. These are the kinds of complexities which many companies in the US are dealing, but equally so internationally. So
I'm sure,
This is exactly what the question I was thinking about asking you, that if a country like America, which is so mature in energy management and handling, is finding some of the complexities in regulatory procedures, what about a country like India or China or other countries? Do you think this is going to
General, let's face it, US is much more litigant in terms of approach to everything than rest of us. And honestly, I would hate to see a scenario where we have a regulatory framework the way US has it and implements it. I know we need to continue to focus on human dimensions and other dimensions, but I think US has gone overboard on
I'll give you an example. I mean, right after the tsunami hit Japan, and there was a whole slew, if you remember the earthquake and the tsunami. So they had modeled, what will happen if a tsunami hits. They had modeled what will happen if an earthquake hits, but what they hadn't modeled was what if a tsunami and an earthquake hits at the same time. So now what has happened is they're retrofitting many of the power plants, and like Tennessee Valley Authority, which is one of our, they've produced 20% of the electricity in the United States. It's a city in itself. And because of the nuclear issues, the entire physical security and disaster risk management under disaster conditions is now becoming a multivariate problem, which they're modeling into the whole system of how the power generation happens.
I think I agree. India, I'm talking of India now in energy, while we go forward in becoming self-sufficient and meeting our demands.
We have now, the good news is that the Indian companies and companies which are actually really made in India are beginning to realize the power of kind of regulatory controls, risk management, and they're actually deploying systems in that effect. And we are beginning to see that happen now across multiple verticals. And I think the energy and utility sector is going to follow suit in the same way.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And it's a big market, and we're on a point where, the figures are so astronomical.
Yes.
The number of things that's going to happen in energy. I'm sure it's good to hear from you that there are Indian companies showing interest and at least engaging to begin with, and buy a small suite and go each step at a time, as Mr. Bhargava said. So
I think people like you should be consulting to Government of India to evolve the regulatory framework step by step. And then the industry will have to conform.
And in a very practical manner, which is doable for an emerging economy.
Absolutely.
And that is
That's key here
It's
too.
scalable also.
Yeah.
And as you go along, like you said.
Building blocks, you
building
can
blocks,
buy
building
things
blocks.
later as you go
But that
forward.
brilliant, I think, that's factors too.
Yeah, so.
I think I'm in full agreement with that, and I do believe that that is the direction in which most emerging economies are actually going in their natural course.
True.
This is a trend which is along the way. I don't think the regulations are a bad thing or a good thing. These are necessary things.
Absolutely.
Just like, I think, some regulations are made to protect citizens, protect laws, protect the interests of the broader society.
Human beings.
And human beings at large. And I think the issue is how much is good enough, and then how do you progress
That
thereafter.
is the crux of the
Absolutely.
problem. I agree with you totally. And with your experience, I think India will also have a system in place which is suitable to its needs.
Yes.
Great.
That's interesting. That's a very good thing. So, all kudos to the energy, as I said, Mr. Bhargav, that a lot of entrepreneurs today who have moved from a concept stage now to the hardcore manufacturing and design and go to market. I was very encouraged. We have a division that does solar systems we are focusing on the rural market off the grid. And so we are looking at, from as small as 17 watts to up to, with the DC systems are, 74 watts, and then it goes to 3,000 watts, lighting up homes. And later on, you have the option of connecting to the grid anyway.
Absolutely.
But so, these are, it was good that you said that this is, now that we have arrived at the parity,
Yes,
I take back good
I
feelings.
think it'll be accelerated growth.
In
Yeah,
fact,
so-
I was working for off-grid solutions. That's something which I'm thinking of working along with Niraj. And now that you encourage us to say the off-grid is the answer, I think I'm quite enthused that we can build up the off-grid solutions.
we-
we're
I'm
talking
absolutely
about.
sure.
So
And
we
even
got-
if we make a small buildings,
Yes.
today, if you look at Gurgaon, just on the outskirts of Delhi, every house top will have a solar unit planted there.
Sooner or
All
later.
new construction has
We'll
got
have-
solar.
Yeah.
So I think this is the movement in the right direction. You start small, you take care of part of your energy requirement through solar. As we get experience, we expand it. We perhaps won't have any terraces, we'll have only solar panels.
In fact, if you go back and look at the history, right? If you remember a few decades back, to getting landline telephone was a big deal in India, and then the mobile came and kind of
It just
short-circuited
leapfrogged,
the whole thing, the leapfrog. I think the off-grid power is going to do the same thing. Because accessibility to energy and power at the point of consumption is where the world is headed. And I think we do not have to invest in an infrastructure which is antiquated or grid-based and so forth. And I think that's something which, we can see it coming.
Like satellite TV is going to be installed, no cables, nothing.
Well, gentlemen, friends, at least I got energized with this conversation. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very